I'm not particularly big in celebrity. When I watch TV, often there's people on there, so-called celebrities, and I don't have a clue who they are. Celebrity Big Brother to me would be better off being called a naff programme with people I've never heard of. But I did meet someone once. And if you Google this person, you get over 200 million hits. If you Google image him, you get 14 million hits. If you do a news search, you get somewhere in the neighbourhood of 40,000 hits, depending on the day. Most major magazines, including Newsweek and Time, have put him on the cover at least once a year because sales go through the roof every time they do. He's the most represented person in art ever, by far. His book is the top seller every year for as long as anyone's been keeping track. His name has been on the lips of crusaders conquering and killing. His name has also been on the lips of humbled servants, serving the sick and the poor in some of the world's most forgotten places. He's been represented in films since the beginning of film. He's been represented on South Park and The Simpsons as a reoccurring character. He's been a superstar on Broadway and the West End a few times. He's often thanked for granting success to athletes on the field. His name is often said in anger, and everyone seems to be singing about him. Celebrities love him. He's apparently got his own clothing line, and he's Brad Pitt's homeboy, and Madonna's too. He's walked on water. He's the most written about person in history, and history itself has been divided into two categories, before him and after him. He's been portrayed as a kind of silly-looking children's cartoon in kids' Bibles. Sometimes he looks like a hippie, and sometimes he looks sad and other times happy, and sometimes without any emotion at all. You know, he's often depicted beaten and bruised on a cross, and he's been on bracelets of millions who ask the question, what would he do? You know, we really, really do live in Jesus' land. And sometimes I think it's precisely because of our presumed familiarity with Jesus that we sometimes fail to take him seriously. That was true of Jesus' people in his own town, and many since he's lived. So I have to ask, how is it possible? How is it possible that you and I are ever familiar with him at all? How is it possible that 2,000 years later, Jesus is still the most famous figure in all of world history? How is it possible that a man who lived on this earth for only 33 years, as a poor, impoverished tradesman who never travelled more than 200 miles from his hometown, was born into scandalous conditions amongst an oppressed people in a foreign Roman outpost? How is it possible that we even know his name, much less getting 200 million hits on Google when you type it in? John Lennon famously once said, "We're more popular than Jesus." I think Jesus won the longevity contest so far. Go ask a 12-year-old who John Lennon is. And I guess my other question is this: why? Why would we bother to put him on t-shirts? Why would we even care what a guy with a very common name for his day, who lived in a place that most of us have never been to, why would we even care what he has to say? Why? But you know, more than that, more than anything, I want to know the answer to this question. And I hope you're with me in this. I got to know who this guy Jesus really is. Because honestly, are billions of people really following any of the images that we've seen and we've talked about so far today? I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I didn't sign up to follow some sissy in a blue sash. That's not my view. I didn't sign up to follow a nice guy who said nice things. The person I follow is not represented on a t-shirt. I don't want to follow one of my homeboys. This person I follow is not the South Park version. Many of today's representations of Jesus, I think, have a whole lot in common with Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy. You know, I've read more books about Jesus than I can count. I've read books by people who love him. But I've read books by people who claim to hate him. By people who say he never existed. People who like him but just don't want to follow him. As well as people who have devoted their whole lives to him and his cause, giving everything for him. And here's the conclusion I've come to. We're stealing Jesus. We're stealing Jesus because he is the victim of identity theft to the worst degree, because we've misinterpreted him and we've misunderstood him. But despite all the confusion that you and I might have about Jesus' identity, Jesus was never confused. Jesus knew exactly who he was. In fact, I love this quote by a guy named Howard Hendricks, and he says this. He says, there was no identity crisis in the life of Jesus Christ. He knew who he was. He knew where he had come from, and he knew why he was here and where he was going. And I want to invite you this morning, get to know the real Jesus. Let's push aside every preconceived notion, every pop culture representation, every picture that's been printed for us, and listen to Jesus tell us who he is. Let him speak for once. See who he really is. Let's meet Jesus, Jesus with edges and personality, Jesus with purpose and emotion and character. So if we want to know the real Jesus, we got to start listening to him, and he'll tell us who he is. And if any of you are out there and you want to join me to find out more about who he really is, then get in touch. Drop me a line. Let's chat. I'd love to chat to you. Or if you just want to look for yourself, take a look at a story. It's a story of a guy called Peter. And Jesus was with Peter one day, and Jesus asked Peter the question, who do you think I am? And you can read the account in Matthew 16. Because it's the only question we need to consider. Who do we say he is?